Evening, everyone. I hope that you are doing well and that your family is safe and that you have what you need during this time. My name is Ruby Powell-Dennis, and I'm very excited to be running for state representative to represent District 97. And of course, to talk with you today and answer any and every question you might have about the topic that we have today. And so we'll be talking about just student loans, adjunct professors, and online classes, and the fact that our college students are already starting to look to us to say, okay, we need something different to make sure that the educational experience that they're paying for is the experience that they're getting, and that that experience is actually preparing them for the world that is now changed as a result of COVID-19. So if this is your first time joining us for a live, I'll want to make sure that I warmly welcome you and say that I appreciate you spending a few moments with me today. Each of our Facebook Lives are an opportunity for me to share in my own words, just one, more information about the campaign pillars, education, healthcare, and supporting small businesses. But to also acknowledge there's a lot of nuance. Those are very, very big topics that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so using every opportunity that I can to dive deeper into what does it mean for us to achieve equity, equality, parity in all three of these areas? Because at the end of the day, I believe the same way you believe that West Tennesseans and Tennesseans across our state need transformative leaders who are deeply committed to making sure that the world we live in today, as well as the world that we live in tomorrow, is better and it meets the needs of everyone who lives in our state. So let's dive right in. So like many professionals, I have student loans. And when I started my educational journey, so I come from multiple generations of women who have gone to college, successfully completed college. I am a third generation college graduate, which I didn't think was that big of a deal until I went to college and started to look around and realize how many people like me, that look like me, who have similar experiences as mine. That is not necessarily the case. And particularly when I think about Shelby County and the work that we've done in the K through 12 educational system to make sure that kids know, the journey to college, we've said it to them, begins in kindergarten. Your preparation toward, whatever life holds for you after your, senior year of high school, we want to make sure that it's a meaningful experience, that our students are well prepared. But one of the things that, even as a person who had, I have 19 women in my immediate family, many women who have gone to college, completed master's degrees, and have since gone on to complete their doctoral studies. It didn't necessarily clarify for me the number of students who were struggling with student loan debt, and the rock and a hard place you're stuck between, because at the end of the day, a college degree is still a vehicle to create social mobility in our country. Whether or not we can always go back and forth about the value of a college degree or the compensation one can receive as a result of getting a bachelor's degree or a college degree. But at the end of the day, there's still compelling evidence that shows, you can look at the average job description, right? There are many that require a college degree. So in a country where a college degree is a vehicle for social mobility, it's important that we talk about equity, parity, and equality in relationship to that, right? Because if you have to have something essentially to have access to certain industries and jobs, then it's only right that we explore, well, what are the systems surrounding that opportunity that might help or hinder our students, regardless of whatever might be aspects of their identity. So I want to share a few statistics that stood out to me that I wanted to make sure I shared with you. So the class of 2019, 69% of college students took out student loans, and they graduated with an average debt of $29,000. 69% of college students took out student loans and graduated with an average debt of $29,000, including both private and federal debt. And the numbers that I'm going to be sharing with you are all coming from sources that you can look up. We'll paste them in the links, but like the studentaid.ed.gov website, which collects aggregate data on student loans, as well as information from a report to the Government Accountability Office and the Department of Education. So that's where these numbers are coming from. So 69% of college students took out loans. Meanwhile, 14% of parents took out an average of $37,200 in federal Parent Plus loans. So in addition to our students taking on loans themselves, 14% of parents are also taking on loans. Now, I don't know about you, but for many folks, in addition to having children in college, they are also potentially paying off their own student loan debt, depending on when they went through our educational system. And they might also be straddling the burden of taking care of their parents or the college students' grandparents and providing financial support. So in addition to the social mobility aspect of a college degree, there's like the overwhelming burden of 69% of students are taking out loans because they know that this vehicle is necessary if they actually want, over the course of their lifetime, to earn enough to be able to take care of their family, home ownership, etc. But then when you couple that with the fact that student loan debt is typically, it actually raises your debt to income ratio, right? So not only are students taking on more debt, but certain groups of students are graduating with degrees that don't lead to livable wages and actually don't allow them to generate enough income to then pay off said degree that they've required. The Obama administration passed sweeping legislation targeting for-profit universities, which were notorious for not only encouraging students to max out loans because the cost of tuition was so high, but they were also seeing record numbers of students default because after graduation, they simply could not acquire a job to pay back that said debt. And the cycle continues. So let's take it a step further. How is that impacting women? Right now, women are getting, according to the Association of Women in Colleges, we are getting degrees, bachelor's degrees at 57% of all the bachelor's degrees awarded are going to women. But then when we talk about wage inequality and how women earn, 60 to 70 cents for every dollar that a man earns, again, we're sitting in the same exact classes, getting the same exact information, getting the same exact degree, but facing wage inequality once we graduate. So where do we go from here? It's time for us to start having a conversation about if colleges and universities are continue to move towards, increasing numbers of adjunct professors, if they're continuing to move towards increasing the amount of tuition, then it's important that colleges and universities be willing to have a conversation around, well, what does support look like for students in the midst of COVID-19? Quite frankly, it's unfair that students are being forced to pay full tuition for online classes in order to keep our colleges and universities afloat. So I decided to personally do a little bit of research to find out exactly where is the money that our students and families are paying to the universities going. So a local university here, about 60% of the operating costs yearly for that institution comes from the tuition paid by students, 60%. But then I did a little bit more digging, and I saw that these same universities that we are proud alumni of are also paying $9.2 million payouts to coaching staff when they transition off, and are expending a tremendous amount of money from student paid tuition to cover these types of costs. And $9.2 million to pay out an athletic coach, a single athletic coach. When I think about how much that money could do for students who come from low-income backgrounds, first-generation college students, and students who typically don't have the family wealth to be able to pay for their degree and are, as a result, taking out student loans, I'm deeply disappointed to know that the vast majority of that student loan money, the money that students are paying for tuition, is not necessarily being used to advance the education of our students. And so where does that leave us? When I was in graduate school at Southeastern Louisiana University, for my senior project, I wrote a paper on using the American Federal Teachers, AFT, as a model for how graduate students who are adjunct professors or TAs, teachers assistants, can use how teacher unions work as a model for unionizing so that adjunct professors can get access to health benefits, so that if adjunct professors are laid off, they're eligible for unemployment. They're eligible for all the same remedies that individuals who work for corporate companies are eligible for. Because oftentimes our adjunct professors are like you and I. They're individuals who themselves have student loan debt, who themselves are passionate about educating students, but don't have access to, all the accoutrements that a tenured professor might have. And so when you put all of those pieces together, the growing epidemic of student loans and the crushing debt that it's creating for at least 69% of the 2019 graduates, the 14% of parents who are personally paying out loans to help cover their child's education while trying to put money into their own 401ks and trying to take care of their own aging parents, plus the amount of money that colleges and universities are using for things like operating costs, which includes the payment of salaries. Where does that leave our kids? And are they actually getting the education they need to graduate from our universities and to step foot in a world that has changed dramatically? A world where many folks have to have the skill to be able to work from home. A world where we are experiencing a digital divide, because while our students in our educational system in our classrooms, we're talking about laptops for them, we're not talking about the fact the reason the household doesn't have a laptop, the reason the household doesn't have internet is because of economic disparities that oftentimes were created by systems and structures and institutions that are still in operation today. So we have to be willing to have that difficult conversation and look at, well, if we're working to stimulate our economy, then how are we making sure that college students, which they were not eligible for any of the stimulus money, how do we make sure that, graduate students who often are TAs or who are often adjunct professors who aren't getting the same benefits as fully tenured professors, the employees of our colleges and universities, because our colleges and universities are saying they're using 60% of the tuition paid by students to pay salaries and wages, yet the fight for 15 continues at our colleges and universities locally, because again, they're essential workers. When our students go back, our nutritional services staff has to go back. When students go back, custodial staff has to be there. Security has to be there. The people who run the mail, people who work in the student union, all of those individuals are essential. And so where's the money going? And how do we stop a cycle where students are expected to continue to close the gap as the cost of tuition rises, but those monies are not necessarily being funneled back into scholarships, fellowships, housing stipends, things that we know are invaluable to students who might be first generation college students, who might identify as coming from a low income background, or quite frankly, might not have any financial help because they're independent students, or a young mother who's returning to college after having her children, or someone who, let's just be candid, they know that college is a mobility vehicle and they want to access that for a better life for themselves. So we have our work cut out. College students, universities play a huge role in terms of employment opportunities in our local communities. I know when I was a student at the University of Florida, we had 50,000 students on campus, and quite a few people were employed by the university because all of those students, we ate meals on campus, we had to buy books, bus transportation, all of those things played a role in the economy of the city around us. And so we can't exempt our colleges and universities from the work that everyone else is doing to elevate inequality. The conversations that we're having around, well, why are certain groups of people not getting access to the things that they need? And when you do that over time, what are the disparaging effects of that inequality? So I offer this solution. Our colleges and universities typically have very large endowments. These endowments often have restricted funds that are coming from donors, living trusts, wills. The money can come from a variety of different sources, but universities tend to have endowments that my hope is can kick in and provide some of the relief that our students so desperately need. We can no longer allow students to graduate from our colleges and universities with substantial student loan debt to cover the operating costs of our universities, while our universities have endowments and other financial streams that are not flowing in and reducing the cost of tuition. We see state appropriations sometimes decrease. And so it becomes one of those things where students are continuously, carrying the burden of what it means to go to college, the cost of college, and yet each year what they receive for that continues to decrease. So I decided to take a look at what did I pay per credit hour when I went to the University of Florida versus what students are paying now. So when I was a student, I was paying right at about, before fees, $77 a credit hour about 20 years ago. When I looked at the University of Florida fees and tuition just this morning, students are paying $111 in addition to fees and everything else on top of that, $111. That is a substantial increase, especially when you consider I am quoting what were in-state tuition costs per credit hour, not out of state. The other part that's really challenging is that as our colleges and universities continue to diversify and more individuals go and flow into our colleges and universities, if the cost of attending continues to increase, that also has long-term effects for our economy and the health of our country. Because quite frankly, the fewer people who can afford a college degree, the fewer people who will have ready to step into the jobs and the needs of our future, especially as we talk about creating green jobs and green careers. Our colleges and universities are a vital part of that pipeline. I also will say this. I don't want anyone to think that I'm coming down on adjunct professors or on our students and families who need to take out loans in order to be able to access a high quality education. People are doing what they need to do. Rather, I want to pivot the conversation and talk about why those who are in positions of power, the decision makers, believe that it is in the best interest of students to take tuition dollars and spend them on, athletics, when the vast majority of our students, while I love the athletic program, I am a diehard college football fan. The vast majority of our students don't participate in our athletic programs. The vast majority of students might be commuters, depending on the college or university that you're talking about. So it's important that we move away from what is an emerging trend of increasing revenue to our universities by simply increasing the cost of tuition, which in turn is funneling down to students, causing them, and in some cases forcing students to decide, do I drop out of school and forego this vehicle that will better not only my life, but the lives of my children and grandchildren? A vehicle that could close, intergenerational wealth gaps across lines of difference? Or do I say yes and take on this debt in order to be able to afford this opportunity and hope that upon graduation, I've chosen the right university, the right degrees, cultivated the right social network, and hopefully within 12 years of graduation, all of those choices pay off? Because that's the reality that our students are now facing, regardless of how they may look or the zip code that they're born in. So, decision makers, I'll ask you this. As you look towards, donors and soliciting asks from donors to help improve the academic experience of our students and to change the lives of the kids who choose our universities, how are you also advocating for parity and equity in those conversations? Because quite frankly, our universities don't necessarily need another building. Our universities don't necessarily need more fancy parking lots. Instead, we want to see right now funds being shifted and priorities changing around how we make sure that right now, during this time, more and more of our students are getting a high quality education that is going to prepare them for the challenges, the 21st century challenges that are ahead, instead of just, succumbing to, well, I'm just going to submit to the fact that I'm going to have all this student loan debt, that I may not be able to have a family because I can't afford it. I may not be able to pursue home ownership because I can't afford it, but I'll have my college degree and I'll be able to get a job. Because right now, we're not even sure when some of the jobs that many people have will come back online. We're not sure when our economy will turn and start to improve for the better. But the one thing that we are sure about is there are thousands, many students whose lives, hopes, goals, and dreams are in limbo because they're having to now decide, is the price of college worth the price tag? That should be an easy answer. We should be able to say our overwhelming yes. and use this year as an opportunity to explore different funding models that long term will not only make college more affordable for our students, but also put us on a path to graduate fewer and fewer students with student loan debt. Because at the end of the day, if 60% of the tuition and fees that students are paying are going to salaries and wages, then it is within our university and our college's power to decide who gets what salary, who gets what wage, and how can we ensure that that is equitable and in the end is benefiting students directly, not just the alums like myself who love our athletic programs. So I'll close by saying this. I am thankful that there are leaders like myself who are running and who are having conversations about the economy from a variety of different perspectives. For me, I know that education is a vehicle to economic mobility. And so I'll never stop talking about the ways in which the economic inequality in our country is also tied to educational inequality in our country. And it starts for many of our students long before they enter a traditional classroom. It starts with what access do they have to great resources in their community before they even go to Head Start? Are their communities walkable? Are there access to farmers markets and places where students can learn about different things before they enter a formal education setting? And then, of course, do they have what they need, both teachers, students, and families, to thrive in a traditional education setting? And then finally, as more and more of our students choose to go off to colleges and universities, are we holding those colleges and universities, their fabulous endowment funds, accountable to make sure that we're not just putting money aside for a rainy day? The rainy day has arrived. If we have not been preparing for any other time, we have been preparing for a time such as this. And because student loan debt disproportionately affects people of color, Black students, Asian American students, Hispanic students, women, individuals from low income backgrounds, and first generation college students, this is a relevant issue. This is a way for our institutions to prove that they care about what is happening and that they're taking personal responsibility for their part in curtailing all of the ways in which student funds and student tuition is not being funneled towards the needs of students. So we have a couple of questions. So thank you all for joining. I want to make sure I go to those questions. And so let's see. So there's one question about, please speak on DCS and child kidnappings by this agency. What do you plan on doing about families' rights? So that's one where, thank you for your question, Bakura. I'll have to look into that. If there is a link or resource that you can share in the comments, I'm happy to follow up on that. Some of the work that happens in family agencies, DCS, might be within the purview of our municipal leaders. And so I would want to make sure that anything that I'm speaking on, I'm also pulling in the perspective and the work that our local leadership and local electeds have done on the issue. And so anything that you can share so I can follow up will be helpful, particularly if there are parents or families that have specifically spoken out about child kidnappings here in Shelby County. Thank you for that. And then also put a limit on Pell Grants, which is horrible. And then just make it retroactive so a lot of older students do not have to take out loans to finish school. Agreed. I'll look into the Pell Grant limits to make sure that for the state of Tennessee, well, they're federal, it's federal funding. So it should be consistent across all states. But I'll take a look at it to see, again, if you're talking about continuing your education for undergraduate studies versus graduate school studies, sharing that context will be helpful. But I can certainly take a look at the limits on Pell Grants, because again, you're right. If there is money available to assist students to finish their degrees, we should be providing money to students to do just that. And again, our universities have endowments. They have financial vehicles that can be used to provide financial support to students who need it. Based on the research I did of one of our local universities, I could only see where they were maybe using about maybe 6% of fees, additional monies for scholarships and fellowships to help students. So I agree with you that local universities, there's like work to be done potentially at the federal level from the Department of Education, of course, which we're not going to get into how the loan forgiveness programs are not working. They are simply not working. The number of people who have qualified for loan forgiveness under those programs continues to diminish under Betsy DeVos's leadership. So there's also like work we need to do around loan forgiveness. But I'll definitely look into Pell Grant limits. And again, what can we do at the state level to support that? And so I'll just close out by saying shout out to Narissa, who's one of my classmates from Florida. And thank you for joining us. But again, the number of students who are struggling with student loan debt is not just an issue for one group of people. It is so much so that we have, our congressional candidates, we have incumbents, we have people who are serving in federal office who are also working to pass legislation around this issue because it is a pandemic. I want to offer a quick rebuttal to anyone who says, well, don't take out student loans if you can't afford to pay them back. That simply would make college a non-starter for many, many people, self-included. I am an individual who did have some financial support from my family, but what people don't tell you when you go to college is that paying your tuition is a start. It doesn't necessarily cover all the social things that you need to do to also be competitive. I had 2 out of town internships that required me to have a car. One of my internships had me in Tallahassee for the entire semester, working in the Capitol. And so again, my tuition didn't cover that. I had to have a means and a way to cover all the additional costs of my educational experience. And that is why student loans were a necessity for me and a necessity for many of my peers, because we would not have been otherwise able to compete at such a big university. There's no way I would have been able to run for student body treasurer of the University of Florida if I had not had to, if I didn't participate in those social opportunities. It's simply colleges and universities are a microcosm of our broader economy and country. And so the same things that I needed to do to learn to survive and thrive at each of the institutions I've attended, I've absolutely applied them in my day-to-day life. And those are still skills that college students will need. So for anyone who believes that student loans, you can just work hard and not have to take out a loan, I had 3 jobs in addition to being a student leader at the University of Florida. And that was how I got by. So I want to close out by saying, if you are a university administrator or you're working at one of our colleges and universities, take a moment and look at your the endowment work that your university or college is doing. Look at your advancement team. Look at the foundations and what are their assets? How much revenue do they have? And start to ask questions, lots of questions around, well, if our universities are posting Juneteenth, support for Juneteenth, if they're, posting support for Pride, if they are posting support for our veterans, if they're posting support for women, if they're posting support for different groups of people, then the money needs to match the support. Because at the end of the day, the path forward can't simply be we continue to charge students and their families, even if we know that they're not able to attend in-person classes, even if we know that the university is not doing everything it can to graduate students at a high level, and if we know that students who typically attend certain universities are defaulting on their student loans and they're not able to get, jobs with livable wages, we need to hold universities accountable for that and not turn a blind eye simply because they might have a great athletics program or they have, a university official or coach that we really like. We simply can't turn a blind eye to that. Not now. Not when we had many, many colleges and universities that did not in any shape, form, or fashion offer a refund to students for classes or work that wasn't provided during the spring semester. So I thank you for joining me. I thank you for caring about the student loan crisis that is happening in our country. I thank you for supporting the unionization of adjunct professors because, believe it or not, they also are straddled with student loan debt. They are also taking on multiple teaching opportunities, sometimes at different universities, to not only meet the needs of students, but to meet their own student loan, crisis and make sure that they are fulfilling their financial obligations and to their families. And finally, we cannot continue to encourage the proliferation of online classes as an affordable and adequate option for our students. It simply is not. Not unless colleges and universities are willing to also make a price point change to reflect that our online classes, our professors, our teachers' assistants, adjunct professors are also not getting the support they need to really provide high quality online instruction. And that doesn't just apply to colleges and universities, that applies to our K through 12 system as well. So thank you. Make the money match the support. Let's reduce the number of barriers and hurdles that our students, particularly from low income backgrounds, our students who are first generation college students, our students who don't have family financial support, the parents who are tapping their 401ks and retirements to pay for college tuition. Let's give them some support, and let's make the needs of our country right now match the needs of our students, and step up to the plate and do what we can to make sure that I am the last generation that experiences crippling student loan debt. Thank you for all you do. I'm proud to be again running for your state representative to represent District 97. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.